In this lesson, I want to talk about sourcing products from outside of China. Now, this has been a very hot topic recently because the current US administration added additional tariffs on goods that are being manufactured in China. Now, the first thing that I'll say with this is that there is a reason that China does a majority of the manufacturing of goods that we import into the US. This has been built up over decades. They are very good at it. They've built up a very good infrastructure. There's a lot of factories. With all that being said, though, labor prices in China have been rising quite a bit, let's say the past decade or so. So some companies and even some factories owners have started to shift production out of China, let's say in the past decade or the past half decade. Now, with that being said, there is no country quite like China when it comes to manufacturing. And a large reason that so many goods are manufactured there is just for that reason, that they are very good at it. And there are a lot of factories that have established there for a long period of time. So I open up with that to say that finding factories outside of China isn't impossible, but expect it to be much more difficult than finding high quality factories inside of China. And there are a number of other factors to take into account when you're thinking about where to get your goods from. So there are some types of products that are much more conducive for being manufactured outside of China, or there's much more of a supply outside of China. Other products, it's going to be very difficult to find factories outside of China. And before I go into some of the other popular countries for importing goods from, another question we get is, well, how do I find all of the factories in the US? And the truth of it is that there just isn't many factories in the US. So you may be able to find a factory to create your goods, but the fact of the matter is there just isn't that much manufacturing in the US. It's not like China or some of these other countries. And unless you're making your own factory, that it's probably going to be near impossible to find a factory that's in the US to make your specific type of goods. There are a few little exceptions there, but overall, there's just not much manufacturing in the US is what it comes down to. So I'll go over a few of the more popular countries, and then I'll talk to you about how you can go about finding them. With the increase of labor costs in China, Vietnam has become another significant manufacturing hub. They primarily specialize in things like apparel or textiles or baby accessories or things in that area. It is slightly lower cost than China, and the reason that a lot of factories have moved over there is because the labor costs in Vietnam are, at this point, quite a bit cheaper than what they are in China. There are some downsides. The upside is that the costs are usually a little bit lower. They can be a little bit lower quality. Typically, worker productivity is a little bit worse. They don't have access to as many materials as what they do in China, so there might be longer lead times. And just overall, they're just not quite as sophisticated. There's less technology than what there is in China. India is another popular country for manufacturing. It's more common to find handmade or very labor-intensive type products in India, again, because the labor costs are much lower. So you'll find things like handcrafted metal or jewelry or some of the apparel items, other just like customized products. So these typically do have lower labor costs associated with them. The downsides are the lead times are usually longer. The factories usually don't have the same standards as China. So like as far as how they treat their workers and the cleanliness of the workers, oftentimes it's even lower in India than what it is in China. And from a lot of the people that I've spoken with, it feels like it's more common to experience dishonesty or theft in India. And then the last country I want to talk about is Mexico. Manufacturing in Mexico, due to the NAFTA agreement, has become more popular over the past few decades. But they specialize in like a certain area, and you'll see things like vehicles come from there, or pieces of machinery, or other types of almost like industrial equipment or car parts or things like that. Those are all becoming more and more popular in Mexico. And of course, there's no tariffs in Mexico, which is really nice. So the deliveries are faster because you don't have to put them on a boat. Because of that, it's better for cash flow. There's no tariffs because of NAFTA. The downside of Mexico is labor's more expensive than even than China, Vietnam, and India. So there's pros and cons with each of those areas. Those would be the three that are most common after China, Vietnam, India, and Mexico. There are, however, others that would just be the three most common ways, or three most common countries that people are using to shift manufacturing outside of China. So if you're looking for these, the best way to do it is by using the Jungle Scout supplier database. And the reason for that is these other countries don't have like an Alibaba equivalent, okay? So the best way to find where to import goods from that is not China is by using the supplier database. And I'd honestly tell you if there's something else better. The best way is usually to search for product type. So let's just search real quick for like baby towels. And let's remove China from the results, all right? So I can add this filter. And now this is only showing me shipments that include the term baby towels that have originated from any country except China, all right? So this one came from Turkey. You can see who some of their customers are. Turkey. Looks like that one's actually the UK, Pakistan, Turkey. I think that's Korea or Japan's flag. So you can see there are other factories, but they're going to be less common. And then depending on what type of item you're searching for, it changes the amount of results that you'll find. So for example, if we search for like our yard signs, let's see what. All right, so like this is one. I'm actually not quite sure what country's flag that is. Taiwan. All right. What else do we have here? Dun, 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 dun. Let's take a look at this company. Looks like they're coming out of Hong Kong, but that might just be the freight forwarder going through there. Taiwan, Hong Kong. Well, let's take a look at this one. Looks like that might be one of the other territories. Here's one from Spain. So anyway, that's really how I go about trying to find factories outside of China. Of course, you can also search for the company that's importing goods. So you can search for, I like to search for all my competitors, see if they have any sources for products outside of China. I like to look for them there. But that's essentially the gist of how I go about finding factories outside of China, or what I recommend for you guys to do. The only other thing that I've heard some people have success with is by finding essentially a sourcing agent in that respective country. I think the challenging thing about that is there's no like real good source for finding what countries specialize in manufacturing what types of goods. So oftentimes people won't even know like what country for sure to look in. I mean, I guess you could use the supplier database for that as well, but oftentimes it's kind of hard to do. So at the end of the day, my current belief on trying to source from outside of China right now is that I would recommend you attempt to do so. So if I was getting ready to sell a product, I would try to find a factory outside of China. At least to get a quote from, or like to try to communicate with and see how the vetting process goes. But with that being said, I also wouldn't let the tariffs stop me from, or I definitely wouldn't let the tariffs stop me from moving forward, because I think what most of you guys will find is that you do have to end up using a factory that's inside of China, and you just have to factor the tariffs into your overall costs. Because keep in mind, when you read the news headlines that there's another 10% added, that's just the 10% of the value of the goods that you're importing. So let me rephrase that in a different way. The cost for the goods that the factory is charging you, that's what you pay the tariffs on. So as you've seen a lot of these examples, it's oftentimes, like a $20 item, maybe we source it for $5. So it'd be like an extra 50 cents on that $5. So it's not like that 10% is getting added to the $20. It's the value of the goods that are being imported. All right. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit more of an understanding of how to find factories outside of China and when it's appropriate or when you should try to do so. And if you have any questions, feel free to just drop them in the Facebook group and I'll be happy to help.